everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown, year number 25 of doing this show. I'm Bob Pompeani. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot to get into, including the Pittsburgh Pirates and what they're up to, and do they still need to make a trade? Or, as Ben Cherington says, the answers lie within. We'll talk about that, but the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Penguins at the NHL Draft. Here to discuss is your panel, Mr. Jason Mackey, right here from the Post-Gazette. Chris Mueller, PM team in the middle. Chris Adamski, Tribune Review Sports, TribLive.com. All right, so get right into this one. Kevin Haynes, 32 years of age.
Yes, guys.
Now a Pittsburgh Penguin. So there you go. Jason, I'll start with you on this. This had to be done because there was a second-round draft pick involved. I can't see any other reason. And what are they going to do with him? He's 32, and he's not the same person as he once was. He's slower, doesn't put up a lot of goals. He's a third-line center, but they have other guys already under contract.
I think they're going to run him out there, Bob. I think he's going to play. I don't know what else you can do with him, and you're exactly right. I think it's more about the second-round pick next year and trying to retool on the fly. I don't hate it. I mean, the Flyers are paying half of his salary. You're paying him $3.6 million. They need middle six depth. They need somebody who can go to the front of the net. I don't know, pair him with Lars Eller, somebody, try to make something useful out of this. I mean, it obviously can't be the only move. It better not be the only move. If it is the only move, that's really, really bad. But as far as a starting point, I don't hate it.
He's kind of old. He's slow. He's not as good as he used to be.
Other than that, great.
No, sounds like a perfect fit with these Penguins. They're not going to win with this core. I think we kind of saw that, right? Panthers are a great team. You know, everybody knows what Florida's capable of. Edmonton, even with 7 players, basically almost pushed them to the brink. But we all saw the high-quality hockey in the playoffs, right? So the Penguins are not close to that anymore. And so I think this is about the second-round pick, like Jason said. This is about trying to get yourself situated to eventually start making younger inroads with your talent here and have young players stockpiled. And that's kind of a grim way to look at it, boys, but that's their reality here. They are in a deep, deep trouble spot to try to be what they always want to be. And so now I think this is Kyle Dubas pulling out of your driveway on an 8-hour drive. He just pulled out of his driveway, cut the wheel, and started going to the beach. And he's going to be a long way till he gets there.
It is kind of wild. Now he's been traded twice in a 12-month span with assets, essentially net assets going to take his contract. Not just one salary dump. He's now been part of 2 salary dumps in 2
It's like the
consecutive
NBA
off-seasons.
when they trade for a guy's expiring contract.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, boy.
So essentially, the Penguins paid for a second-round pick.
Sure.
They paid
By absorbing the contract
what are
and
future
hoping there's something there.
Which, by the way, just tells you everything you need to know about Kevin Hayes, the player. They paid for a second-round pick by absorbing the man's contract.
Right. I mean,
that's what he is.
But that's not to say you can't make something useful out of him. I understand that, and they have to find something for him to do at $3.6 million. I
mean, the bottom 6, the nature, it's like a bullpen. The nature of that, you can flip through. You can't really project year to another. Everybody, at this point, 2 days from now, last year, everybody was saying, oh, he did a great job redoing the bottom 6, and the bottom 6 was still a disaster. Yeah. It's hard to make a good bottom 6 because, by definition, it's your 12 or 6 worst forwards and bottom half of the league at forward. And so, I mean, in that context, this is a guy who's scored 20 goals a few times, was thought highly enough by somebody. At least one person. The Flyer that wasn't Hextall. I looked it up. It wasn't Hextall at the time of the original.
But it could have been.
It was Cliff Fletcher.
Okay.
But I mean, bottom line is they're in a situation now where they're trying to compete because all the guys they have are 30 years old and want to win another championship, which leads us to Sidney Crosby, Chris Mueller, because now he's in the middle of a contract situation. How do you think he perceives what's going on, and how much will it take to get him? He's, based on what he's done, he should command more than his $8.7 million a year, but will he stay at that number to help them, or will he do something less to help them?
If he stays at that number, isn't it because of superstition? Like, hey, I just love 8 and 7, 87. No, I mean, I think that he'll take a little bit more, but not much. He'll probably take what is obviously a discount. I guess 8-7 right now for him would be a pretty huge discount. He might take a little more, but how does he perceive it is the more interesting part of what you asked me, I think. And he can't perceive it as having gone well last year. They made moves to try to be a contender, and pretty much every one of them was like, if Kyle Dubas is Wile E. Coyote and he hits the TNT plunger and it turns out it blows up in his face. Ryan Graves was terrible. I mean, look at this. Some notes. I know Josh Yohe put these out there. Other people have floated this rumors. They tried to trade Jari. No one wanted him. They were willing to trade Riley Smith. Guess what? No takers. If you're Crosby, I think it obviously matters that you spend your whole career here, but he can't look at what's going on around him and feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand those two, like, no takers, can't trade them. I mean, there's always context there, right? Like, you can't trade them for what you're asking. You could lower the ask. You're going to be able to trade
I think
them,
that's a big part of it. We don't know what was asked.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't make sense. If you're going to trade Jari for a 7th-round pick, somebody will give you a 7th-round pick for it. It just doesn't make any sense. What they're saying is the balance of value or whatever. And I think this loops back to Sid, Pomp, where he has to be at the table with people understanding what's going on here. Like, the dollar amount for Sid has to mean way less than what he's hearing from Kyle Dubas in terms of this is how we can chart a path. This is how we can trade somebody and get something back for him. These are our valuations. Like, explain the innards of the process.
Here's a question, though, for everybody. How much, not blame does he bear, because he's still one of the 5 best players in the league? Like, if he wants something, usually it makes sense to try to cater to that because he's so good. He wanted this core kept together. I mean, their basic problem here is they have, and we all know this, I'm not like breaking any new ground, they have a bunch of players who by and large are not as good as they used to be, who are old, who have no movement clauses. So it's a lot of hard, if not impossible to move deals. But
Sid didn't give those out.
No, but he wanted them. Am I correct to say that he wanted Malkin to stay and he wanted Letang to stay?
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with Sid should be allowed to keep Malkin and Letang together.
But
giving out no movement clauses to everybody else is outside of Sidney Crosby's
I understand
purview.
that, but like those are two big ones. And like Malkin is a guy they probably would have dealt. And I love watching the guy play, but they probably needed to move on from somebody there. But because the captain, more than anyone, wanted to keep that triumvirate together, they're together.
They also brought in Carlson and it didn't work. So what's going to change this year with specifically Carlson or Graves?
I mean, the Graves, now that's a contract where you do take the 7th-round pick or you give the asset away at this point if you're doing it. And I guess I remember Paul Martin and even Gonchar to a point, these defensemen, sometimes they come in 1 year, they need it, the second year it fits together more. But I don't know if he had the profile for that to begin with. So I don't know what they'll do, Pomp, but the Carlson thing kind of came out of, I didn't say nowhere last year, but it didn't work either. So
it didn't work.
To prove the point.
Well, we're going to talk more about this. We'll continue it because I want to talk also about what happens now when they look into the next couple of months with Tristan Jarry. We mentioned he was made available. No takers for now, but will that change? And also Jake Gensel. We'll get into him coming up because he was traded today, and many people thought he already was agreeable to a deal in Carolina. That's all when we come back right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Welcome back, #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. We continue the topic of the Penguins. Another guy that we're going to have to be talking about here is Marcus Pettersson, very efficient defenseman from last year. Chris Adamski, he is also in the same boat as Crosby. A year left, wants a new deal. How much would he take, should he take, being what he is?
It's crazy how fast things change. A couple years ago, the big talk was they should dump off Pettersson to kind of create cap space. And where would they be?
He's soft. He can't do this. He can't do that.
That. So, and if you have 2 really old defensemen, you kind of need him to kind of be almost the bridge guy, unless you think Letang's going to play well into his 40s, which I guess he signed well into his 40s, so that could happen. But they need to, and that's where the Graves thing comes in. That would feel nice, kind of taking that contract and giving it right to Pettersson. You feel a lot better off about things right now if you're the Penguins.
Petey's got himself some leverage right now.
Yeah.
I know that much. I mean, look at the left side of their defense right now. P.O. Joseph not getting a qualifying offer. You've got Carlson. There's plenty of questions there on the other side. Chris Letang. I'd like to believe that it's going to be great. There are certainly reasons to doubt or question. The steadiest defenseman they've had on this team, Pomp, has been Marcus Pettersson. If Kyle Dubas calls him up and wants to extend him, I'd gladly have that conversation if I'm Pettersson, but I'd drive a hard bargain. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, he's valuable to them to go. Let's try that again, Chris. He's valuable to them because he does something the rest of the guys don't do, even the really gifted ones offensively. He stays home and does his job. He reminds me of Brian Dumoulin in terms of being a lefty, stylistically, bigger guy who just, I think he, you talk about like a Paul Martin, he needed a year to get into it. Obviously, he was a big-name defenseman. Pettersson just looks like he's been one of those slow but steady guys. We never want slow but steady, especially on the Penguins. What can you do for this team right now? I'd say the same thing Jason said. He wants to call about an extension. Great. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And, as it happens, you've got a lot of money tied up in all these other guys who you can't trade.
Yeah.
Kind
Chris,
of a problem.
back to you on this about Jarry now. If they made an attempt to trade him and it didn't work, obviously they'll probably try to do it again, especially if Bloomquist has a good start to this season. What do you think is in their future, goaltending-wise, with the 3 they have?
Well, you got to see what Bloomquist, what he can do at the NHL level. I don't think that's projectable enough to say he looked good, and I think they believe him as a prospect. I mean, Matt Murray, he's kind of comparable to that. Matt Murray worked out really, really well for a couple years. But you still can't, I think you can't ride with him and say, and you have Nedeljkovic there. So before you would do that, I would think you would want to you can't really depend on Bloomquist at this point. So that's part of the equation.
But you won't know until you see him in action,
yeah,
right?
And that's kind of the conundrum. So I think they would move Jari.
Well, don't you just try to move him because you're not getting the money you paid Jari in terms of performance, at least where it matters. He's been a playoff disaster to one degree or another. Now they're not even a playoff caliber team. Why are you sinking 5.535 or whatever into a goalie?
3.75.
So I just say you're a team that is in transition, whether you are only now starting to admit this, go with the cheaper goalies. Go with the guy that you might not know if he can play or not, because what are you doing with $5 million tied up for a team that isn't going anywhere?
I don't disagree.
You have to pick your spot, though, don't you? If somebody gets injured, if there's a need, then all of a sudden.
Well, you do, and I don't disagree with what Chris is saying, but it also was on Kyle Dubas to get the most for that asset. If you think that Tristan Jarry can play into the season a little bit and play well, and then maybe trade him at the deadline, I would trade the stock when it's higher. Trade the asset when the stock is higher, something like, you know what I mean?
He's been good in the regular
like you're
season,
selling a
too,
stock
at
at its
times.
lowest point. I don't like that right now business-wise for the Penguins. I'd rather see them just hold off on it.
But you have to build your team now. That's the problem with the cap.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to put Joel Blomqvist in the NHL.
It's a big reason when you would do it. You're right.
The one thing, how the mighty have fallen here that might benefit them with Jari, if they do what Jason's suggesting, they wait and they try to hang on and see if he plays well. Most teams, from what I hear, think that he's a product of them being bad around him. Better goalie than people give him credit for, but
which is true to some degree.
Well,
there has been some sloppy
he's
play
had
in front of
time.
him.
He's had stretches where he's been darn good.
But I'm going to defer to Jason here as a guy who covered the team, and Chris. Like, you guys know this. His knock on him in AHL was 58 good minutes, 2 minutes of Tristan Jarry's head exploding, and you have no idea what goalie has replaced him in net for those 2 minutes, and they're bad enough to lose him a game. I don't know how that's the Penguins' problem when that's usually when it goes bad.
It really was a real Jarry season, leading the league in shutouts, and yet having bad numbers, losing his job. It was a very Tristan Jarry type season.
Thank you.
I got to move on to Jake Gensel, Jason. Here he is, thought to be locked up in Carolina, according to Elliot Friedman, and all of a sudden he's traded to Tampa, which means they got to get something done before he goes into this window. What do you think will happen there, and how much money? He turned down apparently 8 years, $64 million.
Tampa would not have made the move to trade for his rights, Pomp, if they didn't have intentions on signing him. And I don't know what's going on in Jake's head, but I'd have to imagine he's talked to Julian Brisebois and looked at everything else that's happening in Tampa. And they've created a pretty sustainable model for success. I like what's going on in Carolina too, but if you hear a plan and this is how we're going to get over the hump, this is how we're going to get back to the top of the Eastern Conference. Tampa's a darn good team, goaltending, defense, all of it. Jake Gensel might just like what he hears, and if they up the offer a little bit, why not take it?
But Stamkos means he won't be there. If he signs
that's
Gensel,
okay. They have other.
He had 40 goals last year, Chris.
I know, but whatever you want to go with. They got dudes, though. Jason's right. If you're going to pick between, and I know Carolina was stacked, and I know they looked like a real cup threat, but if you're going to pick what's the better franchise overall, Tampa or Carolina, for me, it's no question, it's Tampa. They're the closest thing to the Penguins, or they're Penguins adjacent as far as post-lockout Eastern Conference. They've been that good. So.
Is it notable to say, and I know Stamkos isn't the cultural phenomenon, is probably a strong word, but Sidney Crosby is. But you just talked about, and Malkin, you were talking about, not Crosby, but that they're moving on from the icon to kind of keep things rolling in the right direction. There's something to be said for that.
Yes. And it's hard to do that, but yes, there is something to be said for making hard decisions in the name of this will allow us to continue winning hockey games, which is usually the goal, instead of keeping your core group happy because they want to come to work with a smile.
Yeah, but they're not smiling when there's no postseason either. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Pirates. Will they get to the postseason, and what will be necessary for them to do it? Do they need to make a trade? It's next on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, baseball is trending not in a good way, hitting-wise, Jason Mackey. They are on pace to score 1,400 fewer runs, 800 fewer home runs. However, Andy Haynes continues to be under fire. The Pirates aren't doing a lot. They got 2 runs in the first 2 games of the series. Today, 4. They won 1. They're wasting pitching. How much pressure should there be on Andy Hayes, the batting coach?
There should be a lot of pressure on him, on Derek Shelton, on a lot of people. The win today was good, encouraging, but I mean, you can't sit here and say that the Pirates have achieved where they should be or their record looks the way it should, however you want to put that. And I seriously worry about them wasting starting pitching as consistently as they have, Pomp. I mean, Andy Haynes is part of it. The players are part of it. They're so dug into this approach. I mean, I can't sit here and say that I think they're going to move on from Andy Haynes because I don't think that. I think that they think this philosophy is going to work, and I think a lot of people look at it and be like, I'm not so sure about that, but we're going to see.
If you guys write things and no one reads them, eventually it happens long enough, you guys lose your jobs. If no one listens to me or no one watches Bob, eventually, and the numbers show it, eventually we lose our jobs. It's a results-based business just like baseball is. Ke'Bryan Hayes has continued to go way backwards. His back's bad, but it's always been bad. Jack Sawinski, I don't think will ever hit at the major league level again. I think Jack Sawinski has that many holes now, caused by Andy Haynes in part. O'Neal Cruz hit a missile today, but guess what? Not nearly enough of them, and the guy barely has a 700 OPS. Rowdy Tellez is pulling like an Adam LaRoche, where he ceases to exist for 2 months to start the year, and then maybe heats up in the summer. All of these.
Henry Davis, you didn't mention him.
I didn't even mention him because I don't want tears to come down, because I'm depressed thinking about it. But
Michael A. Taylor, 21
homers. He doesn't even look like he can hit single-A pitching. You're right.
Oh, that's right.
So if those are all players that are, many of whom young foundational guys, and they are going backwards under Andy Haynes, why should I have any sympathy and say anything but he should be fired already?
But I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate. I don't necessarily disagree, but it's Ke'Bryan Hayes I think he is who we thought, or he is who he's been. Like, I don't know if he's been, you say he's took a step back, and I know he had his 3 hot months last year, and he had that fantastic debut in September 2020. But it's pretty much, this is more who he is. Is that Andy Haynes' fault? Is that just, I don't think he ever had a profile coming up in the minors that he was it?
I don't think you can link just Key and Haynes. Like, I don't think Ke'Bryan Hayes is healthy. I don't think Andy Haynes in the hitting group has done a very good job. I mean, both of those can be true.
Sawinski's a very tough one because, for me, there's real, that's something you crave if you're the Pirates. Lefty power guy with thump.
Doesn't have to hit 250.
He can't hit. Hit 225 and get on base because people walk you because they're afraid of you, and then have like an 800 OPS because you're hitting the ball over the fence or hitting it off.
The mini Kyle Schwarber, sort of what he can be.
Right.
He's all the bad of Kyle Schwarber and none of the good.
I don't look at any hitter that they've had and seen how Andy Haynes or his group or whatever have made this player discernibly better. Can you guys come up with anybody?
Their philosophy, though, is to go deep into counts, correct?
It is.
Generally, okay.
See a lot of pitches.
I think let's adjust your philosophy to your talent, right? Isn't that what the best coaches do in every sport? You see what you have on hand and you adjust to it. You got a lot of guys that their best chance is probably to jump on first or second pitch fastballs. If they get ahead in the count 1-0, 2-1, start looking for something to thump or go dead red first pitch. Instead, they've got them acting like they're the 2004 Red Sox with Youkilis and all those guys. Hey, let's work the starter for 100 pitches in 5 innings.
And there are certain guys who can do that. There are certain guys, Sawinski, who can't. Just let them swing.
The worst part is that strategy doesn't even work.
You put too much pressure on them, too. That's not a good thing. They start gripping it.
Here's the problem. It's a bad strategy because you know what? In 2004, not every team had 4 guys from the 6th through the 9th inning throwing 100 miles an hour with a 93 wipeout slider. That's pretty much every bullpen now to one degree or another.
And I think the raw power of guys like a Cruz and a Sawinski, 2 guys we're talking about here prominently, it does factor. I mean, you want them to walk. Walks are fine. But you don't want them striking out because they are going to strike. At their best, those 2 are going to strike out a ton.
Everyone's striking out today.
If you're getting deeper in counts, you're going to strike out a lot more.
You give the pitcher more options.
You give him a chance to run into one, maybe.
Deeper you go into a count, the more the pitcher has options and the more the hitter has doubt.
We got to go to a break. When we come back, we'll talk about Ben Cherington, his role in this, and what should they do at the trade deadline. Get the feeling right now you're not going to see all that much, but they're still knocking on the door here. We'll talk about it next on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, the trade deadline is coming up. Chris Mueller, what does Ben Cherington do? He seemed to say today, again, doubling down on where the answers lie within.
I think that, unfortunately, what is that from Shawshank? Salvation lies within. Yeah, he doesn't have a rock hammer here to chisel their way out of this thing. They maybe make one small move for a bat, I think, and then maybe one small bullpen move. But I really think this is all a telegraph. Hey, everyone else is going to be looking at these guys, too. We don't have
the longer you wait, isn't it worse? The price might come down, but there's all these teams looking at guys.
I mean, there is something to that, too. When there's 6 teams making it out of the league, everybody's in the race, and the market isn't there where it was whenever there was only 1 wildcard team. 4 teams made the playoffs. There was a lot more teams out that were selling. Right now, what the Rockies and Marlins are selling in the National League, that's it. You pick their rosters and get a bid against everybody else. And So, a lot of these guys we're talking about, I mean, you're not going to bench some of these guys, right? You're not going to bench Brian Haynes. I mean, where are you going to upgrade? I mean, there are some spots, but
the outfield,
one spot.
The outfield, get an infielder. I was talking to a scout the other night, Pomp, and he said, you can go out there and make a deal right now. The prices are high, but you can go make a deal.
So be it.
I don't think they're going to pay those prices. I don't think they want to do that. I think Bob Nutting comes out to the media. I was one of them saying, I want to see you fix the offense. I want to see some improvement here. I don't know if Bob realizes what that would take to legitimately do that. That's going to cost them Chandler, Solomedo, Harrington, like one of their top pitching prospects, and I don't think the Pirates want to do that. So I think the way this goes, honestly, is that they kind of play rope-a-dope until the deadline and probably add one or two mid-level guys.
Oh, how inspiring.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all I have
sorry.
to say.
I didn't mean to throw water on all of it.
They're too protective of the draft picks, and I understand that to a
Solomedo's having a
degree.
terrible year. I know that you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but come on.
Right.
Like that's the problem. You shouldn't hoard guys based on your own perception of what they should become.
That's what happens too much. We'll see how it goes, though. The deadline is coming up. And we have a deadline for you, too, because just about everywhere you go and you look, prices are inflated, but not at number one Cochran Kia. Right now, during the Kia Summer Sticker Sales Event, get super low lease payments and limited time savings on number one Cochran's best-selling models, from the Forte and Steltos to the Sportage and the Telluride. They have an impressive selection available for you. Send the information on a vacation and get your new ride at number one Cochran Kia, or shop online cochrankia.com. Well, it's been fun. We are done. That's going to do it for another show. Thanks to Chris Adamski, Chris Mueller, and Jason Mackey. Pirates off tomorrow, and then coming up this week, 2 big series against the Cardinals and Mets. We'll see you next Sunday night to talk about it on the number one Cochran Sports Showdown.
There.